Our next session is going to be on building systemic change in your county, which we know can be a daunting task. This presentation is designed to introduce you to actionable steps for any Texas county looking to create positive change. Our speakers will lead discussions on creating a mental health collaborative work group, participating in mapping according to the Sequential Intercept Model, developing local action plans, and following through on those action plans to keep the momentum going. On our panel this afternoon, we have Molly Davis, staff attorney for the Texas Judicial Commission on Mental Health, Doug Smith, a managing partner at Degree Coaching and Training, and Kristi Taylor, the executive director of the Texas Judicial Commission on Mental Health. Welcome, panelists.
Thank you, Dr. Harvey. Well, let me hear y'all. How do you think the conference is going so far? Is that seriously all you got for me? I know it's the afternoon. How do you think it's going so far? Cool, thank you. I am really excited to be here. I'm very excited to be up here with Kristi and with Doug. Thank you all for coming back after lunch. So we're gonna talk about building momentum and lasting change. And you know what, we couldn't really set this table better because every session today has been about collaboration and how you can't do this alone. We all thought that we were done with group projects when we graduated from middle school, and it turns out that being an adult and working in the justice system is a group project. So we are all very well suited for this. It's easy to walk out of here tomorrow, to drive home and go back to work on Monday and just do same old like we've always been doing, right? Well, we don't want to do that. We want to make sure that all the excitement, the motivation, the new ideas that you're getting here, that you actually get to keep it going. Take it home and actually keep it going. So that's what we're hoping to do here today. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about collaboration. Doug is going to take you through action plans, and then Kristi is going to give you this awesome new tool, the Mental Health Law Plan. So there was a saying in Silicon Valley. Did y'all hear this ever? Move fast and break things? Maybe not, okay. It's cool though, right? It's like, that sounds awesome. I wanna do that. I wanna burn something down and build something brand new. But we can't do that in the justice system. First of all, because every one of us who's here has a code of ethics that we need to follow, and I would suggest that you do that. And second, to get real change, you can't do it alone. It is a group project. So instead, I like to think of the wise words of Robert Van Winkle, and you may have heard of him. Vanilla ice? Okay. Stop, collaborate, and listen. But maybe today we stop, listen to each other first, and then we move on to collaboration. So establishing meaningful collaboration, you all have heard all of this all day today, so I'm not going to take up too much of your time. But you need to identify your key stakeholders, and some of these folks are going to be obvious, and others of these folks are going to be less obvious. So try to find those overlooked folks and include them. Your county may already have a behavioral health leadership team, and that's a great place to start. Be open to folks who might disagree with some of the practices and policies that are going on in your county. Be open to different viewpoints. And if you're not reaching one of your key stakeholders, try again. Sometimes in this business, it feels like you're one of those like robot vacuum cleaners that bumps into something and then it has to do a 90-degree turn and bumps into something else. That happens. It's okay. Try again. You may have to try a phone call instead of an email. I understand that. I hate talking on the phone. I hate making phone calls to people I don't know. But that phone call is a human connection and a voice on the other end of the line, and not one of the 1,200 emails that an important person receives every day. To be honest, does anybody read every word of every email they get? I don't either. So try again. And I strongly encourage you to invite and include people who have lived experience in your collaborations and in your leadership teams. If you are not doing that, you are missing out. You are 100% missing out. Your collaborations, your policies, and your projects going forward will be so much richer when you include those voices. Explore the cross-system collaborations that already exist. I did a lot of work in juvenile courts, and juvenile court does not function without collaboration. I think about juvenile probation officers, and they work the phones like the rent is due. They are on the phone with the LMHA, with the school district, the Job Corps, treatment facility, parents, aunties, grannies, law enforcement, CPS when it's needed, all from relationships. Juvenile probation officer can get you a case plan put together like that, because they have those connections and they've built them over years and years. But they're not the only folks who can do that. Each and every one of us has the ability to form those relationships. Find out what resources already exist in your community. There are resources in every community. Some of them go unused. On the Summit website, and you do have to log in to see the resources, but once you do, you're gonna see everything that's there. But there's a whole page of resources, all the slides from all the presenters, but we also included some resources too. There's the JCMH Innovations Map, and if you haven't seen the display over there, Elisa would love to show it to you. 211 Texas. If y'all have never checked out that website, you sure should. And a community resources checklist from the Council on State Governments. This document is pretty cool because it guides you through what mental health services could be available in your community. So it's a little checklist that you just run through to see like, oh, who's the contact person for my LMHA? Who's the contact person for substance use services, for medical, for housing, for vocational services, family services, and so on. It's all right there in the Summit resources, and anyone can use it, and it's free. What data is being collected? It is so important to collect data and find out who to share it with and who else should be seeing it. But I also want to talk about the flip side of data, which is stories and narrative. Those can also be really powerful for forming collaborations and relationships. Someone who works in the jail every day knows exactly what it means when we say that the jail is overcrowded by 24 people. But for someone who hasn't been in the jail recently or who has never been to the jail, they do not see that the same way that someone who knows what that data is like. They might need a story or a photo or a narrative about what it actually means for the people who are in the jail to be that overcrowded, or for the staff who are working there who have to ensure that the conditions meet the standards, what that means. So there's data, but also anecdata. Know when and with whom to use each one. And so once you take a few of those steps, you're ready for a SIM mapping. What is a SIM mapping? Has anybody heard of this yet? A few people? Thank you, awesome. So the Sequential Intercept Model, or SIM, was created in the early 2000s by Dr. Patty Griffin and Dr. Mark Munetz. The model illustrates how people with mental illness come into contact with and move through the criminal justice system, and it identifies all of the places at which a person can be intercepted and potentially diverted from the typical path through the system. A SIM mapping workshop will bring together all the stakeholders to map out the local system. And in creating the systems map, the community identifies resources and gaps in services at each of these intercepts. The community also develops a local action plan. Some of the benefits of SIM mapping are increased communication and collaboration, and also establishing local shared priorities for change. So it's the community who selects those priorities. Whatever is most important to the community is what the community decides to work on going forward. And real quick, in Texas, you have 4 organizations that provide SIM mappings. Of course, the JCMH, but also our friends at Health and Human Service Commission's Behavioral Health and Justice Technical Assistance Center, our friends at the Meadows Mental Health Policy Institute, and then also Policy Research Associates out of New York. They've also mapped some Texas counties. So you have all these choices to select from when you want to figure out who you want to map your county. And now it is time for our first activity. So many activities. There are some blank pieces of paper on most of the tables. We ran out, I'm so sorry, so please share with a neighbor. It's a good chance to collaborate. There's also some blank note cards, and there's no wrong way to do this activity. You just need something to write with and something to write on. You could text it to yourself even, that's fine. It's just for you. You will not be sharing this with the group. I wouldn't do that to you. So you can reflect and be honest with yourself right now. But I'm going to give you a couple minutes to consider these questions. What are the collaborations in my community that currently exist? Where are those collaborations weak and where are they strong? And the last one I think is the most important. What's something that I can do to boost meaningful collaboration when I go home? So if you just want to answer one of them, I considered, why don't you try that last one out? That's the most important one here. And some of you might be thinking like, this isn't for me. I'm not a leader. I'm not invited to those important meetings, but I'm going to push back on that right now. And I'm going to say that each one of you chose to come here today for a reason. So you should answer these questions. You should increase the collaboration in your community. Who could you have coffee with? Who could you have a Zoom date with before work starts someday or over lunch? Have you ever done a ride-along with law enforcement? That can be eye-opening. Have you ever visited one of the partner organizations in person? Maybe you should call your LMHA and introduce yourself to the Tacoma caseworker. There is one in every LMHA. Do you have meeting space to offer for some of these meetings to take place? Because that's valuable too. Can you attend meetings on behalf of your boss or your organization if that's a busy person who needs to delegate that out? Let's take one more minute here. All right, I think we're at time. We need to move on, but you guys were great. I give you my friend Doug Smith.
It's hard to follow Vanilla Ice. It's so good to see everyone. Let's build on this momentum. So you've heard about the Sequential Intercept Model mapping. If you haven't done one in your community, then perhaps by the end of the day, you'll start making plans with your community. So the title of this presentation is Springboards to Transformation, and this is what this is all about. It's about transforming systems. And so the story of every successful transformation in any community starts with, and so we came together. And so we came together. Right? That is the goal of SIM mapping. The goal of SIM mapping is not to create a map. That's actually a product. It's not to create priorities. That's just an outcome. The goal of it is we came together and we stayed engaged with each other. Here we go. Something that happens in a SIM that's truly remarkable is that getting everyone together across systems is an enormous feat. But we've got to keep people working together. And so that's where the action planning process comes in. So what you do is you've identified your community priorities, and you've set some goals, you've even mapped them out over the next several months, and now you get to work. So if you're wanting to produce that system transformation where everyone is continuing to work together, then that means that you are in action all the time. And so what we've seen to be successful is that you create teams. You may have 4 priorities, but you have to create teams. Identify priority champions, people who are going to do the hard work of setting up the meetings, making sure everyone is there, making sure people who have agreed to do something are actually following through on commitments. So having community champions who are willing to stand up and do that hard work, that behind the scenes work. Enlisting people with lived experience. I don't know if y'all have heard that before today, but enlisting people with lived experience. So I'm a person with lived experience, justice involvement, and mental illness. And so working with people with lived experience, they have a perspective on the system, of what it's like to go through the system that a lot of people don't have. And so it's going to give you critical insights that you might not otherwise have. It's going to actually open up innovations for you. Who are the peers in the room? Okay, there's far too few of you. So, so glad you're here. It's good to see you. So enlisting people with lived experience at every point. I have this mission in life to see peers at every point in the criminal justice system. Getting meetings and locations on the calendars. Do not leave a meeting unless the next meeting is on the calendar, right? And it's plugged in. Don't leave it. And charting the progress. So every community here has pain points. And the whole point is to actually turn those into a plan and start reducing the pain. If officers are sitting at the emergency room for 8 hours off the street, right, chart that, because you're wanting to see that decrease because of your efforts. So chart your progress. You want to see the change. And coordinate with all the teams. So if you have 4 action teams, everyone's still coming together to push this forward. I had the honor with my colleague, Dr. Linda Frost, to facilitate a community practice among counties that have, 11 counties that have done sequential intercept model mapping. And this was sponsored by our friends at Health and Human Services Commission in collaboration with the Texas Institute on Excellence in Mental Health, with technical assistance and full support from JCMH. And so we worked through a period of months, it's still ongoing, to actually keep communities continually engaged on their SIM, to identify what's working, what's not working, and to actually work through those problems together. Through the months, what we've been able to do is actually keep counties coming and staying engaged. We always create time at the end of the meetings for communities to take what they've learned and actually actually develop and modify their plans based on what they've heard. We've been able to provide technical assistance. JCMH comes to the meetings, HHSC comes to the meetings, and we bring in other experts. So continual technical assistance. We've had special topics, everything from housing to grant funding to leadership to data sharing. We've had grant coaching for at least one community, and continued individual coaching, so working with communities through reflection and action interviews to know what is actually getting in the way for you and how do we remove those barriers. And we've been able to learn some important lessons, because the lessons of the sequential intercept model mapping and that experience actually give you really important data for how you're going to approach any sort of systemic change effort in your community. So we've been able to learn a few things. So what is common about those communities that are successfully transforming communities? So what's common about them? Well, importantly, they've remained engaged with all of the stakeholders. So there's this tendency after a SIM for people, people work so hard to get everyone there, it feels great. And then it's this tendency to go back to exactly what we were doing before, right? So you hear this over and over again, communities that we've got agreements with police, we're working together with sheriffs, the local mental health authority is fully involved, and then you go back to those 1 or 2 stakeholders who initiated the SIM, and they're doing all the work. It happens over and over again. So what you're looking to produce is continual stakeholder engagement, whatever that takes. Whatever that takes. If you've got a new sheriff and you're not particularly friendly with them, right, it is time to take that person out to dinner. You got it. Community engagement is the key. I don't know how many cards do y'all have? This is my day. I've got this many cards from people. Getting to know people in your community, taking them to coffee. The cards yesterday, I took them back to my room and I've already emailed folks, right? Who's got more cards than me? I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 today. Staying engaged is absolutely critical. Whatever comes up, remember, like, these are elected officials and so they might change. So constant engagement with your community. Making sure so communities that are successful also have behavioral health leadership teams, or they have some type of formal coordinating body that continues to get together. They use data and evidence to chart progress. They're noticing less obvious signs of progress. Things like, we're a county judge in a rural county and we didn't even know what the LMHA did. And now after the SIM, our magistrates and the local mental health authority have each other on speed dial. really important signs of progress, so they chart it. And they also are building leadership capacity because all change efforts are actual leadership incubators. So everyone showing up is continually developing the leadership skills that's necessary. Pay really close attention. One of the things that I'm always looking at are those people who can make a phone call and everyone's going to show up. Get really curious about how people do that. I see Judge Phillips over here. He's one of I admire him, right? Who are the people in the community who can do that? And how's the community continually developing leaders like that? So these are the lessons learned. So we're gonna get you all working together. So for 5 minutes, I'm gonna invite you to work at your tables. So by the end of this 5 minutes, I want to challenge you to have a plan to promote cross-sector engagement in your community. To have 2 or 3 things you're going to do when you get back to your community, get community members working together. So at your tables or with just your partner, I'm going to invite you to consider how do we promote cross-sector engagement and build momentum in our community. So in just about 4 minutes.
Okay, so now you have a few ideas on how you're going to build that cross-system collaboration. What's next? So just to get a feel for the room, yes? Oh, okay, yes. So I was saying now in your discussions, you've thought of a few ideas to start building your cross-system collaboration. So what's next? We've given you a lot of ideas. We've talked about how important collaboration is. But if you're like me, you need a roadmap. You want something in writing to hold it all in place while you are building this thing that you're going to fly. So just to get a feel for the room, how many of you know that your county has been through a SIM mapping? Will you raise your hand? Okay, so that's probably not even a third, would you say? Yeah, and how many of you know whether or not you're planning for a SIM mapping? So that's some more. Okay. Well, we all know that in Texas, it's not one size fit all. We're going to need a menu of options. So you may be a community that has mapped a couple of times, that you've had a collaborative that's cross systems that's been meeting for years, and you're ready for the next step. Or you may have participated in Doug and Dr. Frost's collaborative with HHSC, and you're working on your action plan. We've heard so many communities are building diversion centers. So that may be where you are. But in our experience, what we have found is that when you get into these SIM mappings, everyone is focusing on prevention, as they should be, right? The intercept model is created so that we look further upstream to see where we can intervene. But as the legal system, as representatives of the legal system, sometimes we have left the SIM mappings thinking we did not drill down enough into those legal processes. We did not have the time. We didn't have the right people. We need another step to really clarify what's going on in the legal process. And this isn't just what's happening in Texas. This is national. This past summer, Dr. Joseph Penn, who is a psychiatrist here at UTMB in Galveston, he and Judge John Specia and I traveled to a national conference called the Judges and Psychiatrists Leadership Initiative. And this was started by Judge Leifman that you've heard so much about. And so they have challenged all judges in the nation to examine the court systems, to educate other judges about what's going on when they get those findings, and then to use that information to lead and to go and get other local judges to be leaders. So this sounds like a lot, so we want to give you a little bit of footage of a community who has done this. And here's some actual footage from one of the mappings.
We have to stop Ronan.
How? I have a plan.
You've got a plan.
Yes.
First of all, you're copying me from when I said I had a plan.
I'm not. People say that all the time. It's not that unique of a thing to say.
Secondly, I don't even believe you have a plan.
I have part of a plan.
What percentage of a plan do you have?
You don't get to ask questions after the nonsense you pulled on Nowhere.
I just saved Quill.
We've already established that you destroying the ship that I'm on is not saving me.
When did we establish?
Like 3 seconds ago.
No, I wasn't listening. I was thinking of something else.
She's right. You don't get an opinion. What percentage?
I don't know. 12%.
12%?
That's a fake laugh.
It's real.
Totally fake.
That is the most real, authentic, hysterical laugh of my entire life because that is not a plan.
It's barely a concept.
You're taking their side?
I am Groot.
So what? It's better than 11%. What the hell does that have to do with anything?
Thank you, Groot. Thank you. See? Groot's the only one of you who has a clue.
Okay, well, while that may not be actual footage of a mental health law plan, it's probably not too dissimilar from some of the experiences that we have had when we've tried to collaborate and create plans. So why would you want to go through the process of creating a comprehensive mental health law plan? Well, we've thought about this and how we would like to engage communities. So one way that we've thought about is JCMH is hosting a pilot program where we will select a handful of counties, walk through the process with them, use the checklist that's been handed out at your table, and help a community go through these steps, access any free resources that we know about that you may not know about, and come up with a template so that you have a plan and that everyone can refer to. And the benefits of this plan are similar to what you've heard from SIM mapping. Some of it is identifying the gaps in resources. But again, I think that this will go a little bit deeper into streamlining those processes to identify who's doing what. If everyone is in charge of everything, then no one is in charge, right? So we have to create that accountability. And this came up for us when I think Judge Carr in this room this morning was talking about an emergency detention roundtable that we had. We'd been in many communities where we were really surprised to see Texas does emergency detention very differently. And that's fine. We want a lot of options. But it wasn't working in every place. There are some communities who have law enforcement do warrantless and the judges do no warrants for emergency detention. And then there were communities that were the opposite, that JPs were doing all of the warrants and they said law enforcement doesn't know or is unwilling to do the warrantless. And some communities have both. But then we also talked to counties that said we have neither in actuality, that our JPs or whatever judges that are working on that, a few have said they're uncomfortable, that for whatever reason, law enforcement doesn't want to do it, and so we're going to the next county over. And so that's when it really got our attention, and we thought, well, who's really responsible for that? Who's responsible for the plan and for how it's supposed to work? And so we found out there really is no one in charge, and so we said, let's create that. So we have two approaches. One is if you don't know where to start, you haven't had a SIM mapping, and this all sounds very overwhelming, then apply to be in the pilot. Get in touch with one of those organizations Molly talked about to do SIM mapping, and let's start the process. SIM mapping, action planning, and then drilling down into this legal process. If you're a county that's spent a lot of time in this space and you're very comfortable in this area, then take this checklist and use it as a self-assessment. Challenge yourself to see, have we done everything in every area? It's 10 pages long, so I would be surprised if any county has done everything, but that would be great. We'll go look at that together and hand out some gold stars. Wouldn't it be great to be a model county that said, we've embraced all of this? So this is the idea, is to create a menu of options. So if we look at the best practices this way, it's kind of a long list. We have some words in here like arrest. Well, that's not, a best practice in and of itself, but we have so many best practices that we divided them up by these categories. And some are supported by Texas statutes, and some are evidence-based practices. Another way to look at this would be across the sequential intercept model. So we've created this for ourselves because we started learning these best practices in bits and pieces, and I needed it in one place. So this is something we'll share with you, and I would say each one of those bubbles is either a best practice or a best practice that is also corroborated by a statute in Texas. But that still looks a little bit overwhelming. How many of you think if you brought this back to your county and said, let's do this, that, that might not be met with a lot of gratitude? So we went ahead and put it into a checklist that's very specific. This is our first working copy of this. So if you get into this and say, they forgot something, we have a better idea, we would love that feedback. We'd love to make it better. Right now, we want to put this on our website, have it be digital, because every one of the laws that are on here are linked so that you can go and look for yourself and read it. And we hope that that will lead to better discussions and not so guardians of the galaxy. That's the goal, at least. Okay, so you may not be surprised at this, but we have another activity. First, take out one of those note cards that you have or a piece of paper and look through your checklist and see 3 best practices that you would like to see your county take on. And maybe you're already doing it. Maybe, it's something like emergency detention and you are working on that, but it could be improved. So I'll give you just a minute to do that, to pick 3 best practices and write those down. They could be very broad. It could be that we want to educate together in a multidisciplinary fashion. It could be emergency detention, like we talked about. It could be magistration, that our 1622 process is not really happening. It's not going well. I've had communities say they fill out that early identification form with the 1622 screening, but they have no process to continue it, that it goes into the circular file next to their desk because there's no process to safekeep that and to make sure that you are getting it into the hands of the people that need it, the defense attorneys, the trial judge, the probation folks. So maybe it's 1622, maybe it is jail-based competency restoration that we heard about from HHSC the last session. Okay, so those 3 practices, we are going to try to sort them into what's doable because we don't want to choose the most difficult task that is going to break the entire system, and we don't want to come out with a 12% of a plan. So this is a tool that's up on the screen right now called the Certainty Agreement Matrix. Some people call it the Stacy Matrix because Ralph Stacy, I think, was one of the first people to present problems this way. So for the math people in the room, the horizontal x-axis is certainty. How certain are you about the problem? Do we really understand the problem? Do we know what to predict? And then the y, the vertical axis, is agreement. What will be the challenges? How much consensus do you have around the solution? And so by looking at this matrix, you can see that if you have high certainty and high agreement, you're the closest to the right angle, you're in the simple area. And when people who use this matrix talk about the simple area, they talk about baking a cake. You have a recipe, you've done it a million times before, or it's been done before somewhere, and you're pretty certain that if you follow the right steps and you pay attention that it's going to turn out well. Moving into the next most complicated area is where it's complicated and you're moving further away from certainty and further away from agreement. So I would say an example of this, they said, it's kind of a big jump, but they said fixing a watch or creating a rocket that will go into space, you're going to need expertise. You are not gonna be able to walk in and do this at the last minute. This isn't something that you can do on the fly. It's gonna require sophisticated solutions. And then the farthest out zone of complexity, they gave the example of raising a child, which if you've done that, you know that there are several right ways to do it, lots of opinions, and the outcomes are not predictable. I think that's fair. You know, the funny thing, I was learning more about the Stacy model, and I watched a couple of lectures on the internet, and it wasn't someone necessarily in the mental health space, and so she was going through and giving examples, and she said, you know, an area that's in the complex region is mental health. I thought, oh, great. She just put our entire profession and all of our passions into the complex area. But I think it's a little more nuanced than that. I think that we can use the checklist, break down these problems, and sort them out a little differently. Okay, and then that last column, let's see, let's go to this next slide and look at it a different way. They call chaotic. And so this example is pin the tail on the donkey. You're blindfolded, you have a sharp object in your hand, it's probably loud, people are yelling at you. So it's too turbulent to identify a path forward. And I know that we all feel that sometimes some of the things that we can become passionate about and try to move forward are in this chaotic zone. But if you're being strategic about this, you don't want that to be the project that you choose first. We want to get those easy wins, that low-hanging fruit, and everyone feels good about it, and we move on to the next one. So probably not too surprised, but we're going to take a minute now to sort the 3 different best practices that you chose and think about where you would put it. So if you will take your piece of paper and put it into 4 quadrants with 2 lines, the bottom right is simple. If you move to the left bottom, it's complicated. The left top is complex, and the right is chaotic. And take a minute to write in the best practice under each one of these quadrants. And some of it can be combinations, right? It's not black and white. You can have a fairly simple project, but if you have no agreement on it, then it's going to bump you into that complicated area, right? So that may give you a little bit of context to think about where you might sort that. Okay, we'll just take 4 minutes to do that. Any questions? Okay, and you can talk to your friends at your table if that helps. Okay, do we have anyone that is willing to share your thoughts? We have microphones set up in the middle. Anyone want to share? Okay, Judge Janet, it's right there, right next to you. Okay.
That one doesn't have a microphone.
Oh.
So for us, we were on 1622s, following through with the trial courts, with then a follow-on action plan to expedite those classes with coordination between prosecutors and the defense bar. Utilizing outpatient treatment to reduce recidivism, both in the criminal courts and through involuntary commitment. And then the administration of medications for those on holds for competency restoration. Kind of big, broad topics, but individually not too difficult to work on separately.
Thank you. And how do you, wait, before you go, how do you predict those will be? What will be, any of them simple, or are they all complicated and complex?
Finding the right players is complex. Once they're all at the table, then I think those are simple. But it's one of the things in Denton County that we're really trying to emphasize is we need somebody at the check writing level, so Commissioners Court, to come in and give us direction on where they would like us to start first, because that will focus the team on where to go.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, is that Dr. Almeida?
Yes.
Okay, I can see, yes. Hello.
Thank you. Okay, so pre-arrest diversion, I think that's complicated, but really something we all agree upon. Jail-based competency restoration, I think because of all the work, we have much more knowledge about what that entails. So it's complicated, but very doable. And then there's jail diversion, the whole connection to services. I still feel that it's chaotic. There's a lack of services, connection to services. Unfortunately, sometimes we connect people to something just because it's what's available and not necessarily what they need.
Thank you.
That's it.
And we haven't mentioned cost either, and it factors into this. I think that's directly related to what you're saying about the services, that there could be a solution that seems simple, everybody agrees on, but if it's too expensive, then it becomes complicated or complex.
Yeah. Thank you.
So, yeah, thank you. Okay, well, we would love to have your feedback on the choices that you came up with that you would like to work on in your county. So if you don't mind handing over your card, or if your card is something that you'd like to keep and bring back with you, if you would take a picture of it and send it to us. It can be completely anonymous. We just think that while we have, 500 of our friends here, that it would be great to capture the innovations that you're thinking about, that you're working on, and maybe how you are perceiving how complex and difficult those will be. I think will help guide us as a state. So the next slide has our, oh, sorry, I forgot a slide. So we hope that all three of these different interventions are a part of a menu of options for you. And that if you can put all of these in action, it will help keep those best practices available, accessible, working like a machine, really, that we can get these automated. And then it really creates space for innovation. Then it creates space for that self-assessment to turn into creativity and what else could we do. So that is the goal. And I think I'm supposed to tell us our email address, and I'm very confident it is jcmh@txcourts.gov. Okay, and I'm getting a yes, so that's what it is. So if you would be so kind to send us those photos, we could respond to all of you with the analysis so that you could know where the other counties are interested in working too. And again, totally anonymous. We would just like to gather the data as we walk through this process together. And if you have any questions, I know that my colleagues are thrilled to talk to you at a break or some other point during this or after. Thank you so much.